Hi, Debbie.
Hello, that is the brilliant Sharlto.
Well, that's a great introduction. Thank you. I'll take it.
Oh my!
Favorite interview so far.
I have been such a huge admirer of your work, Sharlto. Europa Report, one of my favorites with you is Corrigan, and of course,
Wow, thank you.
Maleficent, and then you survived Timur Bekmambetov in Hardcore Henry. If you can survive Timur in that film, you can do anything.
You too, guys.
And talk about anything, tackling Ted Kaczynski. Wow. This is the most incredible performance. You bring this, at times, malevolent naivete to Ted, who goes from, at moments, appearing maniacal to moments of lucidity, clarity, and righteousness about man's destruction of the environment. And all the while trapped inside the mind of someone who doesn't know how to express or socialize those thoughts and ideas in an acceptable, nonviolent manner. You take us on this ride that is palpably uncomfortable, chilling, riveting, and you blew my mind.
Well, I have to say, I hope you write it like that so that I can copy it and then use it in interviews, because I can't. I played him and lived him for a year, but I couldn't have expressed it as well as you just did. I'm quite stunned that you picked up all of that as well, because that is pretty much a summary of like what, reading all the pages of 10,000 pages of diary and autobiography and everything else. That's pretty much what I got from him and tried to portray. And you just put that so beautifully and succinctly. That's obviously why you write. It's beautiful. Wow.
Oh, you made him turned him into one of the most fascinating character studies that I have seen on screen. Absolutely incredible, Sharlto. But I'm really curious, when this script came your way, when Tony reached out and said, hey, you could be the man to play the Unabomber, did you have any kind of trepidation or internal concerns yourself about tackling a character like this, who is infamous in, American history, as well as some of the outreaches into the rest of the world?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got the script from my agent, and they sort of told me generally it's about the Unabomber, I knew very little who that was. I sort of thought of him as like a Timothy McVeigh kind of character, or something that had kind of blown up stuff against the government or something. I couldn't remember specifically that he was a male bomber. And then when I started looking him up, I was like, oh yeah, I remember a story or two about him in South Africa at the time. Obviously, he was huge news in America all the time. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, well, I don't really want to play like serial killer. I don't enjoy playing villains. It's often the roles that I can get, and sometimes as an actor, you've got to take what you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really far removed from me. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy. People are like, villains are so fun, and I'm like, no, I mostly do not have that experience. So I didn't want to do it. I read the manifesto, and I was like, okay, whoa, this is a very different. I started researching. And then I was like, the manifesto, this is a very different picture of what I'm being told by, looking at archival press reports, where it's just like a madman is on the loose. And we caught the madman and he's in jail and he's not going to bother you again. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
You start looking at the manifesto and you're like, wait a second. What was this? And then I heard him speak. And there's one interview where you can hear him talk for real on the internet, YouTube interview, and you only hear his voice. I was like, this guy doesn't sound at all. Sounds like he works in a library, or he's a teacher, or he's, exactly what he was, a mathematics professor. excited when he talks about stuff that he's interested in. He's highly energetic. He sort of sounds a little nerdy. And I was kind of like just energetically, almost the idea of a nerdy wild man. I guess kind of as an actor, that's what I can play. You know, starting with District 9, I mean, that's what I did. I sort of played the nerd who became the action man. You know, it's kind of like, it feels like at the beginning of the movie you're watching The Office, and then by the end he can be violent. So I was like, wow, well, energetically and kind of practically, this is right in my wheelhouse. So I was very interested to do it. And then, yeah, I was interested to think about, oh, well, at this time and in this climate, and now it's going to be a white male who's angry, you know, blowing stuff up. Like, see, that's going to make people nervous, isn't it? And it crossed my mind, but when I met with Tony, it was like he wasn't trying to glorify anything. He was just wanting to say, look, there's more to this man, and I want to try and sort of let the audience live his experience as much as possible. And the more we found, the more fascinating it got. And we got so much stuff that we couldn't put in the film and shot it and improv a huge amount once I was kind of in his head. And my approach with it was just be honest. You know, just be honest about this, because society is not very honest. And he was brutally honest, like in his own observations of himself. He's brutally honest. So, for example, Hollywood is about violence. Hollywood would be the first people that, oh, no, don't glorify figures who were violent in the past. It's like, guys, every movie we make has, like, got glorified versions of violence in it. Like, humans are not beyond violence, you know? For me, I've been saying, you know, in 2,000 years' time, I think people will look back at a lot of the movies that we make now and the movies that I'm in and go, like, these were barbarians. Like, what kind of people were making and watching this stuff? Like we do for the Roman gladiators, you know? What kind of culture got a kick out of watching people die for real in a coliseum? It's going to be the same. It's like, what kind of culture got a kick out of watching people eat each other and, you know, do all this dark stuff to each other, and then also act as if they don't. Act as if, like, you know, we're not violent anymore. We're just, like, peace-loving beings. It's like, no, we're not. Like, why are we watching this stuff? Like, the violence is brewing right under the surface. You know, and it's worth being aware of that, and sort of as an artist to go into that. And I'm a very non-violent, anti-violent person myself, so it's difficult to venture there. But when I did, it was profoundly enlightening in so many different ways. You see how close we are to violence. It's right there, man. If we can't resolve our differences, the violence erupts, and you're seeing it more and more, even in like the U.S. society today. It's just brewing. You know?
Yeah.
Brewing. And everyone talks a big game and whatever, and it's like, guys, don't mess with this thing. It's very dangerous. It's sitting in human nature right under the surface. Be careful what you say. Be careful what you wish for and provoke.
Well, and that's very interesting that you say that, because the fact that Kaczynski lives by himself on this land, off the grid, no running water, no plumbing. Obviously, if he were living out there during the pandemic, he would have been prepared for no toilet paper. But that in and of itself is very feral, very visceral, and really shows how connected we are to nature and to that feral nature within each of us, which then comes out when he ventures into the world, into the local town. And it's really striking the way you bring that to life with performance. You are just fascinating to watch as you get into the head of Kaczynski and the uncertainty, which combined with Nathan's camera work, you get around, you know, gets around people and it becomes almost claustrophobic and edgy and nervousness that you don't see in the woods. And I love that contrast that you bring. You add so many colors to this man.
He had them. You know, he had more colors than we could put in the movie. I mean, this is a guy who was, he was so desperate for female company that he would masturbate pretending that he was a woman. Because when he writes in his diaries, because of his need to just feel some sort of feminine energy in his life. You know, and then at the same time, he would have very traditional, you know, roles of a man's place is this and a woman's place is that. But he would crave female company. He would not be able to understand understand, like flirting, like why people would play games with each other rather than just say exactly what they thought about each other as soon as they had the thought, for example, in his diary. One of the reasons he struggled to connect with women. He was so layered. He had, the librarian talked about his incredible sense of humor. He was a funny guy with certain people. He's just like, what, the Unabomber? And it's like, yeah, he was, and his brother speaks of his humor, and the people that knew him well speak of things like that. So he was incredibly layered and interesting, and it was a privilege to be able to, as an actor, to be able to venture into that and be given the rope to just go with, and obviously the themes in the movie, the idea of the environment, what's happening to the environment, I mean, that's become just a bigger and bigger issue every single day. Mm-hmm. The idea of technology taking over our lives is the one thing that I can't shake from the movie.
Yeah.
It's just my phone, the fact my phone, my screens, the increasing feeling that I'm just here to serve the environment rather than that we've built an environment to serve us. I was in Dubai recently, and I felt that feeling. I felt like Dubai is like the city of the future. It feels way more advanced than any Western city I've been in. It's clean, everything works, it's safe, it's shiny, but you literally feel like you're just coming there to serve it, like an animal, like give me the money and function. It didn't spring up around people. They made it, and people came to it. Mm-hmm. It's like that's even what's happening in our cities now.
Yeah.
In most cities you are, it feels like, well, man invented stuff to serve man. And then that slowly got out of hand. More and more, I just feel like I'm a little hamster or a domesticated cow,
Yeah, and it's interesting to see this film under today's gaze and where we are from a socio-political standpoint, because so much of what the cogent and lucid thoughts and arguments that Kaczynski had in the 70s have now come to the forefront. He was very prescient in his fears. And that's a scary thing. That's a scary commentary on us as human beings, that we were not that prescient and aware and we ignored things. But I'm curious, Sharlto, for you, how physically and emotionally grueling was this? Because I know Tony shot this over the course of a year, wanted footage from all 4 seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall. You're out there in snow, you're out there freezing. Thank God you're doing the shower scene when it appeared to be warmer, so you weren't buck naked and freezing. But physically, how was this role for you?
I mean, it was, you hit it again hit the nail on the head. The cold was by far the most difficult. And there's a lot of scenes that we shot in the winter that didn't make it in the film. And so the cold was just brutal. I was sort of borderline hypothermic at times. But the rest was really not that bad. It was quite amazing to be in nature and to have a small little crew, tiny crew, no trailer. So I'm sitting in nature during, between setups. So really, you just lived in that environment. And it was, the more I lived there, the more I would start to see a truck that drives along the road as like, that's a weird beast. I'm sitting in his head. I'm kind of envisaging, from an animalistic point of view, you're suddenly seeing a big truck come driving down the road. It's like, that doesn't belong here. What is that doing here? That has an unfair advantage over everything else here. That's weird. It's almost alien. Mm-hmm. And he experienced that, that these things are sort of alien. When you're in that environment and a jet flies over, that's like an alien flying. It's like, how does this thing have such an advantage over everything else? Everything else in the forest has like a fair chance against each other.
Right.
And then this being comes and it's just completely just can decimate everything else. It just was amazing to live there. It was very relaxing and calming when we weren't shooting. To just be like, okay, just sit by the water, listen to the water, look at the beach for half an hour.
Did you, because this took place over the course of the year, and you'd go and, you'd grow a beard, you'd come back, and, I mean, you have so many different looks in this film. You do a dandy job with a curling iron. I got to give you that. Dandy job with a curling iron. But did you stay in the Ted Kaczynski headspace during that whole time? Or were you able to go in and out of it?
Definitely, I would go in and out. During shooting, I didn't ask for this, but everybody was so into it that they all just started calling me Ted right from day one. And so most of the time, I think until we did some pickups at the end in New York, I don't think they were calling me Ted then. It was only proved like 5 people. But I would sort of live as him. It was a little bit dangerous because he didn't like people, or, at times he would like some people and not other people, so I wouldn't, when I stayed at him, I was trying to avoid the crew, so I didn't say anything offensive or hurtful to people, that was too honest, because he'd be very honest and raw like that. But I didn't, know when I went home. But again, as I say, the thing that I couldn't shake and still can't shake is the real noticeable thing that my life is being dictated to by technology. And I remember being back in South Africa during one of the breaks and riding my mountain bike out in sort of like wildlife reserve. And when I saw a truck come along out of nowhere, just having the feeling, and I wasn't thinking about Ted at all, and just instantly having the feeling of like, oh God, I'm angry that thing is there. Like what? Like that's like an alien thing again. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just a holdover from that experience with Ted of being in nature,
Mm-hmm. How was your collaboration with Tony? This is his second feature. I was there for his first. I'm so happy to now still be around for his second.
Amazing.
How was this collaboration between the two of you? Because so much of this film relies on the visual creative interpretation. And because a lot of the dialogue, you've got voiceover, but dialogue is rather sparse in this film. So we rely on the visual and the sonic elements, the sounds of nature, the saturated sounds of score and music, blending opera and harsh things, and then punctuating it with silence. So I'm curious for that collaboration between the two of you to meld performance with the artistic vision, because the marriage is perfect on screen.
We had an incredibly harmonious collaboration shooting. It really was one of the most remarkable of my career. We were just on the same page. We were intrigued by the same things about the man. As we got new information from the researchers, we would just go like, oh my God, have you seen this? We got to try and shoot this. We got to try and fit this in. Tony would shoot in a very loose way, so he would give me huge room to improvise. But he wasn't just doing it as a donkey. He's an old school kind of filmmaker in this of the sort of Kubrick ilk in his mentality of like, this is the lens, the Scorsese's of the world, that, where it's like very much choosing a camera move and a lens for a particular thing and making a particular decision for a mood that he's trying to create visually. And I would just sort of work within that. I would just stay, while I was setting up a shot, I would just stay, nearby in the wild, in the environment, or just, if we were shooting in town in Lincoln, just hang out somewhere not around everybody. When I was ready, just come in. And it was a very gentle and kind of very real, it had a very documentary feel in terms of how we were capturing it. But it was very controlled in terms of what Tony was actually wanting. So, yeah, it worked great. I mean, the difficulties we had were more in post, trying to decide what should and shouldn't be in. When you have, like, the first cut is, like, 4 hours, and ultimately it's the director's decision, So that was the only time that we had any sort of difficulty. Other than that, it really, honestly, was just a superb experience and just a real creative synergy.
Now, playing a character like Kaczynski, and as deep as you dove into this production and telling this story, has this informed or changed your perception as an actor in terms of what you want to do in the future, what roles you're going to look for, or how you approach something?
Not particularly. I mean, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been starting to I've been working on my own projects, writing, developing, shooting stuff. And it looks like I'm pretty close to getting some of that going. Because I've just been very frustrated with the options of what's available to me. This was one that I jumped at because it had the complexity of, it's what I've always looked for. I love the idea I love the responsibility of carrying the movie, of being able to hold the audience's attention. I like that. I'm not scared of that. So I believe that's like a real honor and a privilege if you can get a role where you're the lead. So I would always look for that if I could, on something that was interesting enough. A lot of the stuff that I get offered leads for, it's just too one-dimensional. It's just, I just can't see myself doing them. And I think it certainly moved me into a sort of a more art house world, which I'd been interested to dabble in, something a little bit more artistically credible than maybe some of the commercial stuff I've done before, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Although my own taste is always in just making stuff as commercial as possible.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to work with someone like Tony, who's a real sort of auteur filmmaker in how he goes about capturing and filming and editing. He edited most of the film himself.
Your approach up till now of wanting to make something commercial, does that come from your background in broadcast television?
Yeah, very possibly. I also think, to be honest, I think it's more my instincts from when I was a kid in high school. I would write plays, I would act, I would shoot little sketches. I think I would be a crazy YouTuber, if I'd been in high school doing YouTube. I would definitely be one of those precocious people. When I look at myself on camera, when I was that age, I was like, God, you were annoying, like just precocious little dude. And it's like, but actually you do YouTube, I guess. I was like, how is it that this guy managed to go to Hollywood of all the South Africans that were acting? How does it end up that it's this idiot? When I look back at myself, but I certainly, I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to have these opportunities.
One quick last question for you, Sharlto, because I know they have to move you along. Did you at any time have any kind of inclination or curiosity to want to reach out and try and speak with Kaczynski himself?
Yeah, before we actually shot the film, I wrote him a letter. I knew he wasn't going to answer. I knew enough about him at that time already that he wasn't going to answer me. He doesn't trust any kind of outside media. He was betrayed by the first interview that someone did on YouTube, the one that's on YouTube right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I tried to. And I think he's the sort of personality that, there's nothing you could do unless you did the film exactly as he wanted. He would never approve. He'd never go hey, I'll give this my blessing. But I would hope that we got closer to him than anybody else before. I certainly believe factually and just practically we did in terms of what anyone's done so far.
Well, you have delivered something that is chilling, it is compelling, it is riveting, and fascinating beyond belief. And I have to watch it again because there is so much in your performance to unpack that I'm just blown away, Sharlto. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. That is so kind of you. And just really just beautiful the way you put the film in your opening sentences today. So, yeah, thank you. I'll definitely look out for your articles. And if you don't mind, if I steal one or two things, I will credit you.
You can steal anything you want. That's fine with me. And I hope we get to do this again in the future.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharlto. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.